My brother, thank you so much for coming. You don't know how happy I am, seriously, because this guy has been talking
Check.
about you. He's the one who I read your book and I was bragging, and he said the guy is next door. Where? In Baltimore. It's you, the, the the archivist, the custodian.
Mitchell, where are you? Anyway, you got to say what's up to Uncle Greg. Brother Baba Holly, thank you so much. It was in Oakland at the Grand Theater in 1994. That's where I first met you. I know nobody remembers back then or back that far, but just to say it's a great honor to be here tonight. And of course, I started teaching at Howard University in 1997. The brother in the back at the desk reminded me that I used to bring the class over here, see Sankofa. And of course, that was the foundation for the literature class. So it's a great honor to be in your presence and to have a conversation with you. I'm so happy that you're able to read the work.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you. But I gotta say a few things too. Then, let me tell you, I wish when I read this book, Indignant Generation, by our brother, I said I wished I knew what this book had on Sterling, because we could have made a more transformed film, because you pulled out so much.
I wish I had seen After Winter before writing the book. I could have written a deeper book, could have written a better book.
We have to do it still, because Sterling is a complex and still unfinished work. But to me, what you have of him, is so much dimension to him, especially the revolutionary Sterling. It's unbelievable. And I knew most people who lived in that period was fearful of that aspect of him. Because for him, for example, he is the most aware, literature, cultural historian who understood the pitfalls of black nationalism. And that's for me what I've tried to focus, but I wish I knew more. So anyway, read this book, folks. It's not about Sterling only, it's about literature. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very elaborate work on the African American literary expression. So I suggest for me, it's my Bible now.
Thank you so much, Brother Holly. The Indignant Generation, the attempt there is to write a competent narrative literary history of the era between the Harlem Renaissance, what we call the Harlem Renaissance, what they call the New Negro Movement, between the 1930s and then to get up to the 1960s. But it really, the career of, as he said, I was a major teacher and a minor poet. It's really the career of Sterling Brown, and for me, as there's a lineage in some ways that connects us to Brother Sterling Brown. I get to him through people like Bob O'Meally, who is a Washington, D.C. native, taught at Howard University, was one of the people that helped to bring out the collected poems that Brown is reading from at that time, and who had great stories about Sterling Brown, who always, he said, Sterling Brown came to read, he said, first get me my money. And, there was no, he didn't get to the microphone before he got the check in his hand or what have you. But, it's through people like Bob O'Meally, and then also my old colleague Mark Sanders, who did some really great work on Sterling Brown, collecting so many of the essays and then really going into the great richness and detail, nuance of the poetry. I'm sad to say I'm more of a narrative person, or I'm drawn to novels more so than poetry. But Sterling Brown was the kind of writer that somebody who, like myself, who was not so committed to the meter and to the iamb and to the pentameter, there was something about Sterling Brown's work that drew me in, was accessible, but then also held my attention with, as you mentioned, the significance of his understanding that there were political dimensions to culture. and that was really powerful and captivating for me. But then it was also a sense of the real. You know, I'm from the generation of keeping it real. The real, the devotion to black vernacular culture, to black street corner culture, right? That was really, really key for me. Somebody was recognizing, you know, in some ways the life that I was living. And, you know, it's the poetry of Sterling Brown. I've read that at my friends' funerals. You know, I've read the poem about Big Boy and the life of Big Boy, you know, at a funeral. And this is not necessarily to a group of people who have, as we say, PhDs and no Ds. This is not necessarily to a educated group of people, but formally educated group of people, a credentialed educated group of people. I know I'm here at Howard at the Capstone, but this is work that resonated so powerfully, and you know, over the generations, captured and really lyrically encapsulated the lives of people who were lost before their time. So you know, Sterling Brown was always somebody who was at the foundation, and I'm proud to really belong to a group of distinguished people who have taken that legacy and then tried to understand some of the interesting subtleties and nuances, but especially in the 1930s and 1940s. And in that way, as you mentioned, Brown has he really has a complex political understanding. The era that he belonged to, and you know, he has this remarkable education here in Washington, D.C. You know, he's an M Street school person. He's going to go on to Williams College with this band of other young black men from Washington, D.C. You know, where you send so many to Williams and to Amherst, and then he will go on to begin PhD work at Harvard University. And they always say that it was the languages. When I have a doctorate degree from Stanford, and to complete that degree, I think that it's changed. The requirements have changed somewhat, but to complete that degree, you know, you had to have a competency in Old and Middle English and 2 languages other than English, obviously, right? And so in Brown's time at Harvard, it was Old English, Middle English, Old Icelandic. It might be Old Dutch, Old German, and High German, but it was like 5 or 7 languages. Latin. I'm not sure if it was Greek, but then I'm almost certain it was French. And you know, basically people would spend a summer working on a language. And you know, as he says, as in the film, and you know, we had to have a discussion about the film because the film is really remarkable. It was a moving experience for me. You know, it was really extraordinary. But as he said, you know, he's teaching in Lynchburg, and in the Chester Himes book, I talk about Chester Himes was born in a house that Sterling Brown had just left. Sterling Brown and his wife Daisy, they just left Lincoln in Jefferson City, Missouri. So you know, he was always working, and it was also pretty competitive to get to the position at Howard with Arthur P. Davis. It took a lot of maneuvering, or maybe it even took more for Davis, I guess, to get to Howard, slightly after Brown. But these were, you know, really, really competitive, highly coveted positions among African-American intellectuals. And so you have Sterling Brown as this, as he said, you know, I'm spending so much time writing criticism. Sterling Brown is the person who gives us our concept, really our modern concept of black stereotypes. I mean, this is the person who introduces that language, and then who also, you know, is going to give you, you know, 5 or 7 templates that we draw from. You know, the tragic mulatto, the mammy figure, you know, the buck figure, that kind of thing. But Brown is writing all this criticism, so that's the fascinating work that he's doing, and you know, he never had time to go back and to complete these languages so that he could, you know, sort of finish his examinations there at Harvard and then submit a dissertation. I don't know if it would have changed things at all. We have several people really on that same plane, and the one that I write about most in the Indignant Generation is J. Saunders Redding, who was at Hampton for most of his career, you know. But Redding also was a Brown University graduate and only completed his master's degree, but you know, was really a prolific writer there at Hampton. Redding is writing for the criticism for the Baltimore Afro-American, and then Sterling Brown is writing for, you know, sort of a number of journals, but especially during the Federal Writers Project era and the Works Progress Administration. In the Indignant Generation, what I try to do is to talk about the engines that produced black culture and literature and black consciousness during the 30s and 40s, and I really emphasize the important work of the Communist Party and African American belonging in the Communist Party, the Federal Writers Project, which of course comes out of the you know, New Deal programs to alleviate the difficulties of the Depression. And then but what I might say winds up making the greatest difference would be the Julius Rosenwald Fund. You have an independent philanthropic fund that's headed by a man named Edwin Embry, and they gave scholarships to African American writers, critics, and also educators, and virtually everyone that you've ever heard of who published a major work during the 1930s and 1940s received the Rosenwald Fellowship. So, you know, anybody that you could think of, but, you know, Zora Hurston, you know, Langston Hughes, everybody would sort of get one of these fellowships, and often that's when they produced a key piece of work. The fellowship, the reason why it's not well known is that they spent the principal, right? So it's unlike, you know, I've received fellowships from the Mellon Foundation, from the Guggenheim Foundation, but unlike those fellowships where some people describe these huge fortunes that are collected, some people describe them as tax shelters for you know, a fortune, right? That you just give off a little bit of it, you get the 501(c)(3) status, and then you keep growing this principal. But Julius Rosenwald, who was one of the Sears and Roebuck managers and organizing people from Chicago, he insisted that the principal be spent down. So by 1948, they'd exhausted all the funds, and they'd given out about 1,500 of these fellowships. But it really did have transformative impact. I do think that other people should follow in that course of action in terms of spending down the principal. We always talk about our institutions, educational institutions, and what they can and can't do. And often they are, you know, they're doing this thing. They're safeguarding this endowment. And instead of, you know, making dynamic impact with the money that they have, instead they, you know, sort of keep imagining that the institution will operate in an orthodox manner in perpetuity. But in any event, you know, Brown was really a key figure, and as he said, he continued to be into the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s. I mean, he directly gives us Leroy Jones and Toni Morrison, in my view. You know, that he would be the foundational teacher, you know, sort of for the emergence of this next group of African American thinkers, but maybe in particular in the 1960s. And Brown had a couple of opportunities, or was engaged, you know, every now and then to see if he was going to take a permanent job at a predominantly white institution. And in fact, at the Rosenwald Foundation, Embry was, he was soliciting university presidents throughout the United States to see if they would allow an African American to teach. And that's how, you know, in some ways, the color barrier begins to break at the end of the 1940s and the early 1950s. And with some people, like the political scientist John P. Davis, you know, will go, I think Davis was taught at NYU, he'd be one of the earliest. And of course, University of Chicago has the first full-time black professor, Allison Davis, in anthropology and sociology. But you know, other people would make the decision that, you know, they thought they could be more effective at a predominantly white institution. Sterling Brown showed the impact that could be had at the capstone of black education, really then as today, at Howard. and you know, you have him as the marquee figure really for a generation of black writers and intellectuals. He says that you know, the struggle about publishing the poetry in the he was contracted, and I have to admit, I have to encourage everybody to read The Indignant Generation, because right now my own memory is a little bit hazy. It was a few years since I wrote that book, but he was considering a number of different kinds of projects, and of course, you know, really we should understand the Mammoth Negro Caravan anthology that he produced with his friend Arthur P. Davis. We should understand that as also, you know, like an incredible offering to us, one that you know, sort of keeps giving. This is the really the only book I think that Chester Himes used to carry with him as he traveled the world, you know, sort of writing his novels. You know, he would keep going back to different segments of Negro Caravan, and that sort of gave him everything that the library, you know, a complete institution for African American cultural life. But Brown was also, you know, what we would call a political progressive. And he said, you know, I mean, he like he said, he was a great liar. And so there's really marvelous language that he always used when asked to sort of describe, you know, what was going on politically, or, you know, the way that he would frame it. And he would say things like, well, you know, like especially if he was being asked in public, and, you know, are you a communist? Have you ever been a communist? Or, you know, the Alger Hiss, Whitaker Chambers period of time. And he would say things like, well, you know, son, anybody who's been to the 6th grade is a communist, and I've been to the 10th grade, you know. And it's also, you know, you want to remember, right, Billie Holiday in 1945, 43, you know, is interviewed by the progressive newspaper PM, by the African American journalist Frank Herrio. You know, and she says, of course, you know, I mean, you know, what's not to like about what the communists are talking about? We're starving, we're discriminated against, we're imprisoned, we're brutalized. You know, I'm all for what they're about. And of course, you know, Holiday was the foremost activist and radical among you know, professional musicians and public entertainers, the key figure who refused to accept Jim Crow in you know, business and or performing. So there is certainly a dimension of that where Sterling Brown is probably not political, and he saw the destruction in a lot of ways of his friend Langston Hughes precisely during this moment. And then he also mentioned Paul Robeson, who maybe would be, you know, sort of completely taken apart at the end of the decade. But this happens to Langston Hughes really at the end of the 1930s, you know, where he's going to be publicly vilified, and, you know, it becomes increasingly difficult for him to make a living. So some of these politics, like early Cold War politics, definitely do contribute to some of the challenges that Brown faced. I guess it was, you know, maybe I'm getting this from Bob O'Meally and a couple of other people that knew Brown. You know, they said that, well, Ralph Ellison wrote about a visit to Howard and also to Greensboro. So he guess he's at A&T. This would be in 1953 and 1954, and he's saying, you know, all of these people who I really looked up to, or Brown had helped Ellison when he was on the Federal Writers Project himself, all these people that I looked up to and who could do really valuable work, they're all, he would say, taking the cure, which was the you know, the euphemism for alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's a dimension also, I think, of his maybe the second half of his life and career, or his later years, you know, where in some ways the difficulties and challenges often also loneliness, isolation, and depression, and that seems to me, you know, will also have contributed to, you know, sort of some of the difficulties perhaps with publishing, but. Brown, you know, is such an iconic figure, but especially because of his standing with 2 feet firmly in the vernacular tradition. And, as you emphasize in the film, this is really the remarkable, sort of, it stands, you had this the clean-shaven, light-skinned guy with, straight hair, and he's like, he is the person who was saying, we have got to have this blues, this, A, B, couplet, flatted 5th note, flatted 7th note. We've got to have this blues as the foundation of our idiom. And I have a question for you. When we get into the conversation, I have a question for you about your sensibility in sort of creating the film. But I had an epiphany on Sunday, something that I have contributed to. We call it Curating and Archiving Black Baltimore. And so we have a collective, and we have archivists and curators, and we had a program at the church that I grew up in Baltimore, St. James Church in Lafayette Square. And the choir from Metropolitan United Methodist Church, they had a portion of the program along with the St. James Choir and the Union Baptist Choir, and they sang "Ain't Got Time to Die," and I had been thinking of that song, or trying to remember that song, for decades, but it's not anthologized. So it's like, it's not, it's at Black Episcopal Church, we have an African American hymnal, that's in the pew with you, right? You have everything right there in the book. And I've been searching for it, looking on YouTube and the rest of that, but I couldn't quite, sort of figure out what it was. And, as we're singing this song, Lord, keep on praising my Jesus, keep on busy praising my Jesus, keep so busy praising my Jesus, ain't got time to die. And I was like, wow, that's like a AAAB kind of a structure, and I wonder where this is coming from a little bit. John Wesley Work that Sterling Brown goes to see Ma Rainey with. I never heard that story before, that they go backstage at the club and there's gold and cleavage and sexual desire. I never heard that story before. But John Wesley Work, wow, with his 1940 collection of Negro folk songs, he's one of the people who starts to put these Baltimore blues songs down on paper that I've never heard. But anyway, I'm saying all this to say that the connection between the spirituals and the blues was only a gesture when Sterling Brown is going to work at sort of the colleges and begin his career, and it's sort of like, again, with his feet set firmly in the black vernacular tradition, that we begin to have sort of the concept of a total culture. And I also thought, when he was talking about the difference between the Senegambian and the Negrito, right? It's hilarious, right? I mean, he's a funny guy, but the thing that I'm working on now is it's called The Birth of Jazz in Baltimore. And in the Chesapeake, it's an argument for the origins of jazz in the Chesapeake, or in the same way that we understand the incredible fecundity of New Orleans and the Mississippi River Delta area, we have to think about the Chesapeake, because the Chesapeake is, debatably, right, it antecedes New Orleans. So, one of the things that I'm trying to say about that cultural evolution, is that, we sort of, we want to think about, it's roughly, it's under 90 ships, but it'd be about 90 ships that come directly from West Africa to Maryland. And we're really talking about, I don't know if I have any people, you all, I realized this yesterday, I made a good distinction, right? I'm an East Sider. Like, I'm from the east side of Maryland. I know I'm over here on the west side. And but anyway, my PG County folks, my Montgomery County folks, my Calvert County and Charles County and St. Mary's County folks, this the Patuxent River, right? That's where boats are landing. In fact, you're going to have so many boats landing. Banjo culture is, or the lute instrument, percussive lute instrument culture.
Really ledger. He's a nice guy, but he's a rich guy. So I go there and all this black folks packed. The who's who of Howard and I think there was a conference Henderson held at that time. I know Bambara was not there, something like that. So they were just hobnobbing, and in the corner by the fireplace on a rocking chair was this light-skinned man, very distinguished, his age, and I'm always raised to be around elder people. To me, I didn't care about this foxy brown men and black women hobnobbing and all that. I didn't care for it. I was like, it's not something I enjoy always when I go to reception. So I saw him in the corner, and I just went to him, and I said, hi, who are you? Or something like that. He said, who are you? And then I said, I'm Haile, I'm a new teacher, etc. He knew I was a foreigner and all that, and he excused my, the way I came at him. And then I realized, did he tell me, or Ackland came, or somebody came? I realized he was Sterling Brown. How do I know him? Because at UCLA, when we are so alienated by white critics of black cinema, we were looking for black criticism from black, film criticizer. And I ran into Imitation of Life, criticized in 1934. A movie called Imitation of Life came. And Sterling Brown wrote amazing review of that movie.
Once a pancake, always a pancake.
Yeah, it's a racist movie, but the white woman who wrote the book said, you are so ungrateful. Here we give you a chance to be, I wrote a book to make you people have a chance to be in a film, and you are ungrateful. That made him more hero to me. It's like, that's Malcolm X for me. And so when I realized it was him, I was amazed. And he was by the fireplace, and I stayed a little bit with him until he was taken. And then Shirikiana was planning to do a film on housing, and she tapped into him, visiting him at his place, etc. And then she took me with her, and I'm like studying him at his place. And basically, at the same time, for the television station, Howard proposed, I wanted to do an African idea called Around the Fire. Meaning, I said there are many elderly black people in the area who worked once upon a time at Howard, and we will profile them with children around the fire. It was an African proposition to a crazy people, okay, that Sterling Brown had a rough time with. I didn't know he was a hot potato to the university's government, the presidents. No presidents have ever seen this movie. I even give one president a DVD of it, insisting. He proposed something to me. I said, okay, see a movie first I made 100 years ago, whatever. Look at it, view it, and then let's talk. He never saw it. So to me, I knew I was landing on a hot potato here. Once I proposed to the university, give me money. It will be a TV show for you guys. And I said, I think I should not be just imprisoned in classroom. I'm a filmmaker fundamentally. I want to be given foundation to go documenting black people, over 50, throughout the whole East Coast all the way to Florida. I had the energy, and and there were students who also would be part of this whole, crew. And the university didn't go for it, so I had to find money. When I proposed him first, Sterling Brown, a documentary on him, Around the Fire is the concept still. If you notice, we shot him really as a fireplace. What I regret is you didn't see the kids. My students are staring at him where he's telling them all these things. And they're also the ones who are throwing to him names like Duke Ellington, etc. The time to get the timeline and the personalities, etc. So the idea was to continue documenting aging black people. And my rage for Howard is this, that they never bit the idea. I did this film with my students in spite of the university. Okay, so the whole beginning is this, and I know people who love Howard hate to hear this, but to me, this is where the fireplace began. And we did we followed it on our Wilmington 10 film, the concept the same, aging black people, not the Wilmington 10, the young people, but the aging parents who raised them. We concentrated as them, the fireplaces of the history and folklore of black people. And so that's just, to give you an idea. But students took turn crewing different aspects of the filmmaking. I supervised the overall, directing it. It represents me clearly because the mockingbird theory on literature is what I think of a majority of black trash movies. The mockingbird imitate the imitation analogy he speaks about in the mockingbird theory of literature, where you imitate white folks, that's one kind, and then there is the one's identity, a story or literature or music or film coming out of your own identity, your own accent, your own temperament. And so he speaks, everything he says here applies to cinema to me, because cinema is also a visual literature, and that is really the foundation. And I'm going to get Carr, you lead us whatever way in this conversation in your best skill. One, this is encyclopedia here, right. Sitting here. You talk.
Got a couple questions.
You ask them questions. No.
All right. And we'll take question at a certain point. Yeah.
First of all, I'm grading papers, so I just came here to watch this film for the 15th millionth time, because Sterling Brown represents the soul of what black institutions are supposed to be. And those 43 years you spent at Howard, Haile, and before they made him an offer he couldn't refuse, this brother right here, we go down Union Station, you go south to Virginia and I go north to Philly, until Emory was like, come on, man, because you came to work at Howard. You probably still be across the street. You want to tell that story? Yeah, go ahead.
Needed a job for more than one.
Exactly. Sterling Brown stayed. He could have gone. And a lot of that is inside conversation that we're watching. Mm-hmm. So when he's talking about, I can use my teacher voice. No, that's all right. Because in a minute, we're going to need all four of these. Let me tell you why in a minute. Thank you, Abel. When he's talking about Locke and the blues, when he makes that conversation about Franklin, when he's talking about John Wesley Wirt, when he's talking about Carter Woodson. I was working with Woodson on that encyclopedia, and that's the one where Du Bois them tried to invite Woodson to come with the Encyclopedia of the Negro. If y'all see that picture of them standing over there on the steps of the Carnegie Library with Schomburg is there, all the people there, Mordecai Johnson, Ben Brawley is there. James Weldon Johnson, I think he is. Locke is on those steps. Woodson not in the picture. They try to get Woodson to come be in. He said, I'm working on my own encyclopedia. Plus, y'all take white money and they're going to tell you what to do. I mean, this is the central tension continuing. And so when he's telling y'all those stories, there's so much subtext in it. But I think at the heart of it is black institutions and the choices we make. And where do you spend your life and your energy? And think about what Michael Thelwell said. He said him and Story Carmichael riding around in the car, and they laughing and joking, and then they bring up Sterling Brown, and they get real solemn. And then Stokely Carmichael at that point, well, I guess he's Kwame Ture at that point. He says, that man changed my whole life. Thelwell's like, I think I'm gonna write something about him. He said, if you do, make sure you put me in there. He says, and in the essay he writes, he says, I made good on my promise. I said that. But that was that 60s generation he's talking about. He's talking about y'all as y'all came into that, you know, because in the 50s it's a little different. So Larry, when you write in this book and you fill that gap, you know, Brown is never honored across the street. There's nothing over there named for Sterling Brown. Eleanor Traylor tried for years to create a Sterling Brown chair. She eventually succeeds. But even in that process, she's a lone figure in that. And maybe there's anybody here who knew Sterling Brown? There we go. All right, very good. We're going to have some conversation here because I always think when we are here, there's going to be people who have that direct connection. Brown, the commitment he made was in spite of the institution. And I think there's a break in the genealogy in some ways, a break in the lineage, because now there is this fascination with that work. But as Michael Thelwell says, you almost had to be there for some of it. And so finally, I'll just say this, and then I'm going to say one other thing, and we'll be in conversation. The opportunity we had that you wanted to do with Around the Fire, I hope you got your DVD back. You didn't get it back? If this shows up, your daughter's a lawyer, we're going to sue the shit out of them people. No, I'm just saying, I'm just telling you, because this intellectual property thing is real. We can talk about that in a minute.
He lost it.
Did he?
He went back to his office.
Yeah.
He said it was somewhere here and looked all over the place.
Okay, if it show up somewhere, we get to the discovery phase, yeah, we're going to sue everybody over there. Anyway, the point is this, because he back in the chair now, right? Anyway, yeah, I don't give him no damn. He said, Wayne Frederick lost that DVD, we're going to get it. Anyway, the point is this, I'm doing this for the record, plus it's being live streamed. My point is this, now there's a fascination and people are harvesting the intellectual foundations and the genealogies for profit and awards. Meanwhile, the actual living tradition these people poured their whole lives into remains under assault. So all the elders, all the people who are the living links must be recorded now, must be supported now, must be worked. That's what I was going to say. Now the thing I was going to say. Can we get another chair, Abel, and put it right there between Haile and Lawrence? I'm just moving over, man. I'm just moving over. Move over a little bit. No, put. You stay on the end. We put the other chair right there. Abel, you put it between Larry and yeah, because this being Sankofa, our liberated space, as you always say, Haile and Shriek and everyone else, you never know who's showing. So I came in here just gonna sit in the corner, grade a couple papers, put some grades in, and sit here and listen to this conversation. And who's standing up there at the back, just very nondescript, but Imani Perry, Professor Imani Perry. So Imani, will you come up here and sit in this? One of our greatest culture keepers, memory workers, who, unlike John Hope Franklin and Carter G. Woodson, according to Sterling Brown, is a cultural historian. So it's going to be a lot that I'm just going to sit here and be quiet because, you know, Imani was coming. She's been all over the world since then, but she came here because you can't see this film anywhere else. So I'm going to let her talk. Take this microphone, please.
But he's not escaping. Sit down.
Oh, no, in a minute. But let Imani talk.
No, I just, first of all, it's such an honor to meet you. I came here because I'm writing about Sterling Brown, and I knew I had to see the film in order to write about Sterling Brown. And of course, always a joy to see. We have known each other for how many years? Quite a while. Yeah, at least 35, maybe something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Y'all dating yourself.
Yeah. So I'm still in awe. I mean, one of the things that I was just thinking about, though, in that bridge moment, and thinking, and particularly about how first Brown is under surveillance, right? Interviewed by the FBI multiple times, and then marginalized because he is the person who is mentoring the student activists on campus. And I've been interviewing some of the folks who were in the Nonviolent Action Group and then joined SNCC. And then, so there's that, but then he's also has this role for the Black Arts Movement. So there's the Southern movement where he's actually bringing students into his home and protecting them from retaliation from the institution. And then also his voice circulates, right? So mother's 82, and she says, oh, we all knew Sterling Brown poems, right? We all, and this is Dudley Randall's broadside. He's reprinting, and so young people are in the late 60s and early 70s are experiencing him as giving them a way of telling their own histories in the midst of movement, their organizing, right? So that is that voice of elders is actually part of what gives them a sense of energy and legacy that drives, and I think it's really important to talk about it in that way, because so often, and it was so moving to hear you talk about sitting at the feet of elders, because in part I feel like that's been my whole life as well, in that so often people talk about that period, late 60s, early 70s, as a break, when in fact it is a period of paying incredible homage to elders, right? As opposed to, so there's a different tactics politically in some way, but a deep sense of history, both sort of history of a generation or two, but also an older history.
Well, let me add also, so we can go into, as I was talking about, the revolutionary aspect of his content and form. Content and form. For me, what blew my mind as I went into his literature, his poetry especially, people say, they throw around portraiture a lot. It's the most exhausted. Every poet, they said beans and carrots and something, they'd say, For me, portraiture goes with wood carvers. Portraiture goes with ceramics or sculptures. Every word, the rhythm and the structure is plastering a character. That's what I tried to do. Though this, I'm not interested in blues poetry. Blues meaning, not blues, the thing. Blues meaning feel sorry for me literature never fascinated me. I always went for those who raised to go at it. That's my attraction, and it could be whatever. And for me, the resistance aspect is very important. In literature, same thing. I see in him this amazing, settled revolutionary, the resistance. And then also the way he portrays black people. He cut and pastes them, and before you know, at the end of the poetry, a whole statue sits in front of you. That to me is the most underestimated aspect of his contribution. In that, I'm not going to compare him to nobody, etc., but to me that's the most revolutionary architecture in poetry, that you see ordinary black people being sculptured by his skill with the words. And to me, I just wanted to say that, because I'm not a passive person who makes a movie about anybody, everybody knows. I carefully go for people. And usually it is this aspect of it. And I've always spoken before to you guys about resistance. Black people in America don't fascinate me when they are crazy entertainers. They don't. I don't care how much they jump, they go. I care less about sport. But black people and their resistance is my biggest blood transfusion, my survival. Black people's resistance makes me a person who says, I'm African, I'm black, I exist, and therefore the hell with you if you don't accept that. So to me, his literature, and he's more, he's very settled guy. When we showed him this in the editing room, he was so emotional. But his emotional was like there's a whole sitting Buddha there, sat there, and you can tell, he was touched by what we tried in this film. Okay? And then the other thing is he kept coming to other events we held at Howard Third World Film Conference. He was sitting in the back. He would come, and he realized in the film section, me and my students were actually new winds, starting something. And he used to come and sit there. And it's because I think we try to, even in my conversation with him and Sheree at his place, I think for me, he gives, his knowledge of black music. The music I'm using here is what I heard in his own house. I didn't want to bring nothing. Paul Robeson, he has them in the house. So every music in the film is from his whole collection. And when he talks about music, my goodness, it's just, I wished with all the stupid crap we film, if we really put in pile the stupidest husk black people film, okay, but took a portion of that and documented him, we would have an amazing spinal history of black America and America. But it's like we waste so much somewhere. I had so much scarce, I don't have resource when we did this film. No resource. Committed students and me, period. Yeah. And we used everything we had to do the film.
Let me ask you a quick question. One of the things we saw those clips from, I think that was a symposium, was it Library of Congress? We were sitting there with Monica Cobb
Yeah.
and Rayford Logan.
Yeah.
And John Bracey's mother, who's sitting there, you know what I'm saying, who taught at Howard for years. Bracey always talks about that. First, where is that footage?
I don't know where the footage is, but the recording is at the Library of Congress.
Recording, yeah, I heard the recording, but until that film, I'd never seen any of the footage. And that Senegambian moment in Negrito, because Rayford Logan is huge on the international space.
Listen, we have, by the way, this is again a thing that tires me. Sorry. It's a thing that tires me is how much sound we have of him, how much footage we have that is didn't make it in the film, that I asked Howard to be the ones we need to collect these materials professionally to archive them. I still have them here. Okay. Because no one cared to respond to my point of saying, this is very important. People will come from all over the world to research at Howard, keep it good, etc. And so the thing is, even, for example, I think we have also, Shirikiana was doing a film on housing. I think she has taped him for hours on Washington, D.C. history.
So first of all, you got all that stuff. Look, mine's about to pass out. How am I gonna write this book? But it's interesting because when he calls Rayford Logan a Senegambian and Montague Cobb a half-breed, no, I'm saying in terms of inside politics, Logan too never leaves Howard. But he gets his papers. His diary is at the Library of Congress. I don't know if you all ever read any. The fire he shoots. There's this love-hate relationship. But Logan is such a figure outside Howard in terms of international politics. I mean, you talk about what's his sister, Mers Tate, and all them and of course Tate and Logan have a terrible relationship. I mean, the things that and Barbara Savage writes about it. I remember she was here working on that book. But I'm making that point because in the white gaze, Logan is probably better known than Cobb. So when he says he's a half-breed, I'm wondering, this is all inside baseball. Montague Cobb is a titan. Montague Cobb is an MD and a PhD. Montague Cobb was pioneering this work in the sciences in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Montague Cobb, when he calls him a half-breed, I'm wondering if that's also inside baseball relative to these black institutions and I'm just wondering, because what do you mean by half-breed? Because there are people who walk in both worlds. This is right here. If you ever read her book, South to America, you get a sense of Imani's roots coming in these spaces. But she's worked also in what would be considered the elite spaces, the elite white spaces. Larry, you've done the same thing, including spending time across the street. A lot of this for me is really about how we think about where we are and what we're trying to do in those spaces. And what Sterling Brown is talking about there as someone who was very much disrespected and who didn't let it stop him. Because remember, he's supposed to help Rayford Logan write the history of Howard. But, he can't, pouring all that life force into those generations, including those generations. I'm so glad you're talking to the SNCC folk and the Nonviolent Action Group folk and the NAG folk. Particularly because in the Wilmington 10, of course, you get Reverend Cobb in there. Charlie Cobb's father. He's Martin Cobb. So I'm saying these conversations, to me, I'm wondering how y'all think about this, having to navigate those spaces. How do we think about Black intellectual production in a way that's directly related to building and sustaining Black communities rather than kind of narrating intellectual work in a way that these white institutions simply commoditize? I don't know if any, I mean, that's all I think about. Every time I see this, I think about that, because you ain't going nowhere. And I ain't going nowhere. And there are people who say, you Negroes ruined y'all's careers by staying where you are. And our response would be like, go to hell.
We could have done a whole film on all those folks.
Yeah.
Because they were in and out of the buildings we walked in.
You were trying to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
To me, it was after Sterling, we just moved to Cobb or, Logan. Howard didn't care to support us.
Nah, and do y'all know any Black institutions? Go ahead, y'all jump in. I'm just thinking now.
I mean, one thing that would be nice would be if we still had, I always admire hearing the language, if we still had the opportunities to talk to one another using our own idiom. I'm just being fanciful and wondering aloud. I think you obviously have to make a choice, and you have to do the things that you think are going to be sustaining and uplifting relative to where you are. The choice for me now was, in some ways, is kind of an easier choice because I'm in my hometown, so I do work here in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins that, I just wouldn't have undertaken in any other circumstance. I wouldn't have made the sacrifice, to do community building work and trying to do. It's not so much. I wouldn't describe it as political organizing. We have one of the most amazing political organizers and political lobbyists on behalf of Black people in the building tonight. You brought up Sister Amani. We got many people here. We got leaders of beautiful struggle here at Lawrence Grand Prix. But I would say that the opportunity to continue to engage, as Arthur Ashe said, the opportunity to continue to engage people who have known you your whole life, that's a unique experience that in our era, I suppose, or in the 2020s, is something that perhaps Black people more than others, that we're having to have so much mobility, so much movement. I remember just looking at people's careers. You could look at people like Brother Dyson or people just every 3 years. It's sort of like a new place, a new institution to try to develop or engage in, and new kind of work. But I would just say, like in my own case, relative to communities and intellectual life, I definitely have made a commitment, like in terms of hometown and hometown institution building, which obviously also involves, trying to generate resources so that Black people can have jobs. That's different work than what most of us do. Relative to the classroom, though. Brother Gerima has mentioned that so much of this work that we do, right, it's just coming from our hearts, and it's not about sort of having a budget or winning a grant or sort of having a lot of paid staff. We're doing the work that we're committed to do. It would be great, though. Like I say, I'm one of these people who really enjoys opportunities to engage in intimate, sacred spaces like the one we're in, and to be able to use the idiom. We be in live stream on camera. I'm always a little bit, I don't want to fall into too much idiom. Let people know who I am, that kind of thing. But nonetheless, it's a joy. It's a joy to be in the circle.
So, I think like many people, maybe most, my job and my calling are not necessarily the same thing. And so I like my job. My calling doesn't even necessarily have to do, I would say, with higher education, to be completely honest. My calling is about the life of the mind and writing. It's being an intellectual, it's being a writer. And so I have a job that facilitates me doing that work, but that work isn't necessarily, I mean, it is in many instances connected to students and other scholars, but it's also connected to artists, but it's also connected to people who have nothing to do with universities. And so much of what my job has allowed me to do is actually have the time and space to have do this other kind of work. And it's why I always say the most, people read my bio and they say all this stuff, and then I often say, you forgot the most important detail, which is I am Nita Garner Perry's grandbaby. And that is really what, that's what animates what I do. Yeah, and I think, but that's also not something that is rewarded. And I think the question is, and this is what I think part of, for me, why Brown is so inspiring, is because there are so many things about him that fit the image of a kind of bourgeois, super elite, right? Born to the manor. I mean, born on Howard's campus, right? And the decision to follow his convictions and also the sense of beauty that he had, right? That took him in ways that led to a betrayal of many of those privileges, right? And that, to me, is what is most inspiring, right? So what do you do with he's one of these, Mordecai Johnson brings in these young guns, these superstars, right? And transforms the university. And what does he holds on to that moment for the entirety of his career, the sensibility of that moment. So for me, that's the inspiration, because wherever you are, when you're institutionalized, right, you are always going to be battling to some extent, yes, right, given the way these institutions are endowed, given the way that they are sustained, you're going to be struggling with notions of, you're struggling with power and wealth, right? And so there's always this question, well, what relationship are you going to have to the institution? And whether that's one of confrontation or it's one of, I'm here, but I'm also, when Baraka wrote about, Sterling Brown coming to the dorm to teach him in A.B. Spellman, right? Because, or even just thinking about the fact that Brown could teach African American literature at Fisk in the 1920s. He couldn't teach it at Howard till what, the 70s?
That's right. Come on.
Right? So even just the different institutional cultures matter. And so I think that's, to me, is the sort of, what is the relationship we have to being institutionalized as this ongoing one? Question.
Yeah, I know y'all got some.
Okay, brother, take the mic from us.
No, I'm not taking it. Well, I could listen to this all night. This is amazing. But reflecting on Brown's critique of, I guess not critique, but his commentary on Carter G. Woodson and John Hope Franklin, I want to ask, who would you guys think meets Brown's standard of a cultural historian? The first thing that comes to my mind is
Contemporaries?
no, just on period. Because the first person that comes to my mind is Sterling Stuckey, who sat with Brown. But just other examples of who would meet his standard of cultural historian.
In those, you probably got about 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 100,000 hours of this in Maltry. He was on the faculty with William Leo Hansberry, and he was on the faculty with Chancellor Williams and Frazier, although Frazier is funny, taking them students' papers and turning them into, anyway, but saying the Negroes ain't had no culture coming out of Africa. I mean, but But still, his work betrays that. I mean, there are a lot of people they didn't make the cut. Were there other people he mentioned? Because I'm thinking in terms of contemporaries, I think there are some people.
That is our shortcoming. When we throw name at him, it's based on the economic of the production, how many people should we be, the musicians, etc., because we want to get just his own take on different things. But I think on the cultural historian thing, it's a deeper insight he has. To me, historians do not understand culture. I'm sorry, film, to this day, I cannot say there are film readers who read my film text. I leave it alone and I will pass. But because it needs a different eyesight, a different consciousness to analyze. History is like surveys, facts, etc. You could be good at that. But literature is another thing because it goes into folklore, it goes into aesthetics, it goes into lineage, where it comes from. For example, they can keep talking about Africa, this, Africa, that. But how do we detect the African genomics in the way it occasioned itself in the Americas, in Brazil, although that is not done yet good, in my view. You know, it's not enough to say it came from Africa. But it's very important to go into the aesthetics of it and trace it, its lineage. Okay, and I think to me, the way English is spoken in America, the Ebonics discussion started it, but then it got dropped because the petty bourgeois black people felt insulted, and they dropped it. Yeah, but Ebonics was literally proposing a different kind of reading of black language, which is black language for many people is physical manifestation of what comes out of your mouth. To me, the thought system, the way you think, the thought system shapes what comes out of your mouth. And that is the battleground. To me, those are like essential readings. People have to study thought system of different parts of Africa to really retrace, the accent. And when I say accent, not the accent, the physical accent, I'm talking about the mental accent that comes out of cultural context. For me, Sterling has it. I was not alien to him. I came from Ethiopia. I can read, his whole, even when he talked about lie. It's an amazing African culture to make a higher point. Okay? Africans create certain kind of communicative proposition to transform the issue or whatever that subject matter is. So to me, I'm not sure. Even when we talk about black films, we talk about content only. The story, as if that's not the cultural aspect of cinema. Cinema is the language, the visual language in the way you have organized the audiovisual, the way you fabricated the audiovisual, the way you frame the inner depth of the visual and then organize it. Otherwise, to me, black cinema for me is in the rhythm and the pace. We're not going there. We're just going, if it has blacks in it, that's black films. We have not yet leaped out of that. It's always on, people I respect. People I respect in literature who talk so much that I learned myself do not themselves understand African cinematic language. They thought if there's an African in the film, it's an African film. I say, no. Then white folks have made it before you. They had black people in their movies. We're doing all Tarzan movies. But what is the black cinema? What is the thought system that drives the aesthetic structure of etc.? So to me, You know, I'm a filmmaker, but I know a lot of people talk stuff. They don't know how to read me. That's all I know. Because I'm not only, I make film in America with a thought system transported out of Ethiopian culture. How many people go in, and even in Sankofa, how many people know the Ethiopian in that film? The Ethiopian me. Nobody. I'm not going to tell them either. Because to me, you got to go deeply into the culture of the storyteller. The psychological, social, cultural aspect of thought systems. If not, you don't get it. So for me, that's Sterling Brown. Why I'm crazy about him. I don't finish watching this movie. I like to watch it all the time. There's no other movie I made I want to watch all the time. This is one film because it debates with me discursively. And sometimes even I sat there today and a few other times how in rhythming I messed up in the editing room. Because where you saw, when Duke Ellington looked, I forgot his music to come there. That accentuates what Duke is saying. What the hell are you saying about me? Kind of stuff didn't come out. It got lost. And also, when we get to the Senegambian, I didn't have a good transition. I went back-to-back cut. We call butt cut. It was not rhythmically. So I can show you throughout this film and my films where I'm off. When I saw Sankofa in Harlem is when I realized the rhythmic problem I was having. Because the audience went this way, Harlem especially. They were with me, and then they went this way, and I went this way. I said, I wish I could re-edit. I don't re-edit, but because to me that's a fact of where I was. I do better, etc. So to me, I'm saying that's why he speaks to me. You know, I'm not as crazy as nobody. Maybe one time I was on Langston Hughes when I found the book Good Morning Revolution. But I'm not that crazy about poetry for poetry's sake. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I want the fighting spirit of poetry. The resistance aspect of black people is the most glorious thing black people can claim without a problem, and the world knows it throughout. But all the decadent stuff black people do is erasive of the best of who they are. Sorry, I'm going in another direction. You guys should say more.
I'll jump in there. No, I'll jump in. I'm gonna take this in. Who do you
Let
think?
me just say, people that I feel like I learned something from. And you know, you don't agree with anybody 100%, but a contemporary person I feel like I learned a lot from. Not just in terms of the way they kept a good cultural record, but then also the way they wrote it down. Is Daryl Pinckney. I've always enjoyed his writing. Thought that he was able to do a lot of things well. I'm probably there might be some flattery in there somewhere or something. You might have said something about me, and I was responded to that. But anyway, David Lionel Smith. So I think that Pinckney is good for the whole tradition. What I tend to think of, sort of like from Phyllis Wheatley up to the present. And then I really liked the critic David Lionel Smith on the Black Arts Movement. I thought that he did some great historical work, cultural work. We've already mentioned Sterling Stuckey. Somebody said Sterling Stuckey immediately, right? Well, you said Stuckey right away. Okay, yeah. So, he would be a foundational figure. And then just going, a little bit back. I mean, Ralph Ellison was my guy. I mean, again, he's going through periods and evolving and, making some evolutions that, places where I wouldn't be able to follow him with. But nonetheless, certainly in the 1940s and I would say at least the first half of the 50s, there's nobody who I think is more again nuanced, a subtle reader of the black grain of cultural production and influence than Ellison. And there's a way that I'm also what's the brother's name? Not James. It's in the book, brother. Bear with me. James Bland's son became a jazz musician and a filmmaker, and he has a film called The Cry of Jazz that really does anticipate so many of the moves that he's reading some of the early Leroy Jones criticism, but it's prior to the publication of Blues People. And with that, I just wanted to give a shout out to Chicago because, like, so the heir to much of what Sterling Brown gave his total unified life for. I mean, or the artistic statement that he's attempting to make, the historical statement that he's attempting to make. I mean, much of it is also paralleled by Frank Marshall Davis, who is, you know, a formidable poet in his own right, but then he's an amazing jazz critic. And in the same way that Brown is writing for these, you know, sort of publications with the Federal Writers Project, and, you know, also things that are academically credentialed works. Frank Marshall Davis is the jazz critic for maybe it's the Defender, but it's either the Defender or the Afro. And you know, his criticism, in my view, you know, it really does stand the test of times. And he's looking at these works week in and week out. So, thank you.
You got anybody you would add, Imani? In terms of, I would say quickly, and I'm come back with this microphone. I'm gonna walk back to you. I think which is why we had to have these conversations in these spaces so that people can know of each other and be in conversation. Mercer Cook was teaching over there. Mercer Cook translates Sheikh Anta Diop's dissertation, African Origin of Civilization. They're on the same faculty. And I'm thinking, what was the, because remember Sterling Brown, I don't forget who the interview was with. Y'all might remember. Go ahead.
I was just thinking of who Mercer Cook's parents were, that's all.
Yeah, of course. Will Marion Cook, right. So, I mean, so it's like these moments, one conversation could have altered the trajectory. When he's talking, I forget who interviewed Brown about Baraka and Karenga. And he said they misread.
Yeah, he misread Armstrong.
Yeah, he misread Armstrong, right? Misread. And I'm thinking, what would have happened if Abdul Justus Nascimento and that black, what would have happened? Just one tick this way or that way could have opened up a whole universe of conversation. He mentions Paul Robeson, of course, and he, like you say, with Stuckey, I want to be African. Stuckey's almost obsessed with Paul. I mean, so I'm saying, and of course, Stuckey's mother, Elma, was a poet. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying one symposium, one visit, and this whole thing could have gone another way. You know us, man. We all these people talking about Egypt. You go to hell. You don't know a damn thing about Egypt. So the point is that Lorenzo Dow Turner is tracking down all these languages, all this stuff, and they are contemporaries in many ways. And I'm saying one conversation. Again, just thinking about finally when he calls Cobb a half-breed. Cobb is in the National Medical Association Journal writing history.
It's a major award name for him still.
No question. Now, it ain't the American Medical Association. If Montague Cobb was white, there would be research institutions named for him. These guys, and if you read and of course y'all read this backward and forward, the Journal of Negro Education. If you read the Journal of Negro Education in the 1930s and 40s, what Charles Thompson and them are doing, there's a lot of cultural history in that. And I'm just wondering, you know, the answer to that question is almost like you see the possibility. And you just came from New York, right, to Schaumburg. These guys are all, there's some class stuff, you know, there with Schaumburg and, you know, Locke and them guys. But I'm just saying, it would have been nice if maybe one or two conversations could have been held in between. And I see your wheels turn. I'm going to take this back. I don't know if you want to say something. I'm going to take this back and I'm coming back to you.
I'll wait.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all right. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you for creating this film and for showing it and for having this opportunity to be, you know, so privileged to witness it. Sorry, I'm thinking. I was at Williams as a history and philosophy student working in the Sterling A. Brown collection when it was newly acquired, and that was for about a year. What I was able to see was a lot of his personal correspondence and incoming letters that were addressed to him, as well as like his school or classroom syllabi and teaching materials. And having those more like incoming letters that were being addressed to him from different publishers, from different former students, I was able to learn parts of his personality. I was able to understand things that he had written for external review and how they were being perceived, but being able to hear him in his own voice in this work, it has completely changed and colored how I was able to absorb that at that age and at that time. The collection there is quite vast, but it's in rural Williamstown, which makes it so inherently inaccessible for the DC audience that he was shaped by, and that has also shaped me too as a DMV native. So thank you so much. I'm thinking about, Mr. Gerima, what you were mentioning about identifying the African in your work, and then also so many of the parallels between folklore development in the US and how that has shaped you, and kind of identifying and creating your own African critical language in creating your work. I'm wondering if like the Amharic concept of Semina work kind of mirrors or like acts as that lineage to the American or the African American creative and elusive poetic tradition that resonates so much with you of wax and gold. It's something that has piqued my curiosity recently, but I'm wondering if that also has potential to act as a critical lens to your work, or if you think that it seems like a proper partner to the African American tradition.
Well, thank you for your insight. You from Ethiopia? Okay, got you. Okay. Well, you know, the one, I think when I spoke about the thought system, I'm really speaking about narrative logic. And all human beings have this narrative logic. And when we come in contact with Europeans, the first thing they eliminate and destroy is our narrative logic and enter into their logic as we tell the story. We learn all the table manners of storytelling from Europeans, especially English in Ethiopia. That's the damage it has done, is killing local narrative logics. And so for me, I think with the African American, the resistance aspect of it resonates with me because Ethiopians resist insisting in writing in Amharic or in Tigrinya, whatever. They insist on writing in that. And that itself is resistance. And then not only is it a writing of language, the physical writing, but it's also what you stated, the wax and gold. Discursive, in my father's house, discursively discussed either in Seminawork or in wax and gold. And it's not a neutral relationship. The language itself, my father never utters outside that logic. And he's known for it. He throws a word, it's like digested, talked, and laughed about after he's gone. Okay? And I am that man's son. And my thinking is in my initial battleground. In white America, in theaters, try to change my thought system. That's why I'm very sensitive and very vocal about it, because the drama school I went said to me, they took my picture, they recorded my voice, and they said, when we finish with you, you will not recognize yourself. And that they thought was a compliment, but that I had passed that colonial mind that would have taken it as a compliment. Because now the black power and the black struggle in America is kicking, and I'm trying to find which way am I, where am I in that struggle? And therefore, to me, this is the colonial arrangement of Africans from day one. When we came in contact with them, It's not only the exploitation of the raw material that we continue insisting. It's the gentrification of the thought system. The logic of thinking, how we think, is also displaced. Gentrification in Washington, D.C. has killed black culture also. We can look at the house being taken, the building being taken by white people. But what about the cultural displacement endorsed by the black bourgeoisie in the city council and mayors that come up with this sound disordinance? What is it they call it? Noise ordinance. What is that about for African people? African people who always create social interaction, relationship storytelling. You know, when I came to Chicago, I saw the Africans in the snow. And so to me, the idea of destroying black kids, you know, right to oral communicate with bucket drums and stuff, to stop that itself is the most deadly gentrification. To me, that's why I'm saying the petty bourgeois, the university scholars do not understand the soul of displacement or gentrification. They talk about the economic fine. But to me, the eternal one is changing your thought system, your cultural factory system, your thought system, where you, by your own inherited logic, you sing songs. Okay? By the way, I just forgot when you asked, I think we can add, I think Baraka is the best on music. Black music, Baraka is your man. Because to me, that's why PBS, when they did jazz with the stupid white guy. Yeah. And you know who they left? You know who they left was Baraka. You know who they left was Baraka. And you know why I'm aware of that? Because he's Sterling Brown's student. Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, to me, the battleground that I am attracted is in the idea of defending our thought system, how we think. Because once we give in that, then we normalize everything savage about Europe that had done damage to the world. And we see it prevalently now, manifesting as like normal, ordinary people reciting it. There's the Trump period is apologetically by the elite looked as if he made sense. What he makes sense is his Jeffersonian anti-African essence.
Go ahead. And as we're talking, Dr. Kai, I don't know if Nubia Kai has written a beautiful historiography, that question of memory. I know there's something you might want to say, Dr. Kai. And she done snuck in the back trying to hide, but I'm going to out Carol Boyce Davies back there. Yeah, she's sitting back there in the cut, so I don't know if you want to jump in and get some of this. All right, go ahead, Joe.
Give her the mic.
Yeah, so I told her. She said, oh, no. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, come here.
Okay, you know, hi, Manny.
You sit right there.
He's trying to sneak out too.
I know.
I'm going to pass the mic. That's all. Thank you.
Go ahead, sister.
I know. I came to learn, so just letting you know. So the person I actually took a class with was Arthur P. Davis, because I was studying African literature in African studies here at Howard in a time when people like C.L.R. James and the others were on campus, so I have that experience. But because I was doing African Lit and wanted to have a broader experience, I took the classes with people like him and Stephen Henderson. So Arthur P. Davis was the person I studied African American Lit with. So I was pleased to see him referenced several times by Sterling Brown there. So the other connection I have, I worked in the library as a library assistant. So part of my experience was always in the browsing room, which now is kind of used as a place for lectures and so on. But back then it was a place that people just came to, sat and read, we showed film and so on there. And there's a couple of times I would see this person coming in and he would just coming to read the papers almost every other day, and it was Sterling Brown. So I asked the librarian, "Who is that man?" She said, "Oh, I just Sterling Brown." So it was he was in my landscape, and I unfortunately never had a class with him, but I was able to see him as part of a community in an ongoing kind of way. But I'm just saying, when I came back here to Howard, invited to chair the English department, the department had totally been, it seems to me, unattended to. Nothing was happening there. We had to hire staff. And so it was loaded with people from the community surrounding, gentrifiers as well, who were teaching the students writing, who are still teaching the students writing. So the extent to which you did not have a really strong faculty that were there as a, sort of tenured on-the-spot faculty, and you have like 40-something people teaching writing like a factory, found it very problematic, and it still is. So what we've been doing is trying to build a faculty. Actually had to hire staff, had to do all of those things. Things were falling off the ceiling, totally unattended. So that's the kind of thing we've been doing ever since I've been there. So it's really a kind of uphill kind of climb, and just letting you know that's the kind of work we're doing, trying to rebuild. One of the first things we did, and you mentioned English and you mentioned literature earlier when you were talking, Haile, one of the first things we did was vote to rename the department from Department of English to Department of Literature and Writing, because really that's what it is. And I discovered that there was no African lit taught at all in the department. None. And they indicated that that was taught in African studies, so that they didn't teach it there. So we are really pushing to have concentrations where students can take African literature, particularly with the rise of so many African women writers. There should be no reason that there's not a course available then. I was told by Mbai and others that if you can get that in English department at Howard, that'll be like a win already. So that's what we're working towards. So just saying that the questions of how to reestablish a department that is vibrant and at Howard and make it live up to that reputation that people like Sterling Brown has is one of the major pathways we embarked on. But we need your support. The department naming went all the way through to, and I was going to talk to you, Greg, about this, went all the way through the College of Arts and Sciences, to the Provost's office, but it sits right there. And I think I think the Board of Trustees has to decide, and they're really concerned about changing the name from English to Literature and Writing. So if it doesn't go through, that's the reason, and you're hearing it from me, hearing it now. But we are hoping that we'll find a way to reconvince them that this will happen. If we have your support, I'm sure it will work.
Well, let me add also, since you brought Sterling, at that age that we're filming him, by the way, every day he is at the 5th floor. No elevator in that place, by the way. Walking upstairs and sits there. And Ethelbert Miller was also located there. But I'm not sure. I remember one time I had a lecture at Spelman. I saw him staying at the same house I stayed, with students surrounding him. I don't remember an image like that at Howard. Even when I asked this issue, somebody said to me, I think Carr maybe, I don't know, said to me, what are you talking about? When Du Bois came at Howard, there was only 6 students in the auditorium.
Yeah, it's possible.
I just said that to put more fire on my criticism.
Let me say, I just want to say real quick. First of all, it's the 5th stack, but the 3rd floor. Ain't but 3 floors, and Founder's up there. But he's in that corner office. Ta-Nehisi asked for that office when he came. That little corner office. Those cubbies were rear offices.
Ta-Nehisi knows that's Sterling's office?
Yeah, that's why he asked for it.
Oh, okay.
But those are rear offices, like secondary offices. By then, Brown's under assault. You know what I'm saying? They put him. That's where the Department of Afro-American Studies is, and we're happy to be there because I don't believe that institutions can be transformed. I think, Imani, the answer you gave is probably the most insightful answer when it comes to institutions in power I've heard in a single conversation. That name will change, Prof, because all you got to do is put them on blast. You know, what they hate is bad publicity. So as this is streaming, change the name. and y'all just flood the zone, all right? Because the neoliberal university, I don't think can be reformed in any form. But finally, there have been people who kept the lights on. Eleanor Traylor in English, for example, The Heart's Day. In other words, there's an unbroken genealogy of struggle. I think we always have to be mindful of that, because we're in a moment now where HBCUs in particular are clout chasing. And anybody who comes into the space is told by the institution that you're saving the space, because these Negroes are basically moribund, and there's a contempt for the faculty, I think, at universities in general, but HBCUs are no different in that regard. And I think we have to figure out ways to decenter the academy. I mean, that's one thing about Brown. It's just when you decenter the academy, it actually probably strengthens the capacity of those who are in those spaces to do their work. Sankofa is the great example of that. I think this is what you all are doing now, bringing those conversations over here. For me, I don't even go over there except teach my classes. But does Fred Moulton, don't he do the same thing? I'm not doing any committee work. I'm not. Now that may be easier to pull off or harder to pull off, depending on where you are. And we, you know, because after 26 years, I've been on every committee Howard has. And I'm telling you right now, Sterling Brown, and Jeff, maybe you can answer this, and then we get. Is it apocryphal that after they had unceremoniously separated from him and gave him that office, he drove his car, since they took his parking space, drove his car to the flagpole, got out, and walked up into his office? Yes, there's a certain contempt I think you always have to have for power. I'm Sterling Brown. You don't have to recognize me. You take my parking space, I'm going to park at the flagpole. I think about it every time I pass that flagpole. But Eleanor Traylor never forgot that, which is why she curated those Hearts Days year after year after year, even if they didn't raise but enough to pay for the dinner. And she's still here in her 90s, living down the street right off 16th. And all of that was for Sterling Brown, for that genealogy. So to have you here now, Prof, to have you here now, Carol, is coming back. Because in that same browsing room, Ackland Lynch, Conversations in Blackness, before they got rid of him. They didn't shove him out the door the way they did Nathan Hare, but the whole point is that there's always going to be a tension and always going to be a contestation for power. And I think, you know, we will win.
Yeah, so this is interesting because this is actually the question that I've had sitting on the tip of my tongue. So tonight is centered on Sterling A. Brown, and I think of Frances Cress Welsing as just a couple of people of a long list that have been pushed out or unceremoniously dismissed by the university, and just even this exchange that y'all were having. And then if we zoom out to just think about some of the Black brilliant minds and artists and creatives who also were like vilified in their lifetime and glorified in death, Billie Holiday. I'm curious, since we're here, and to focus on Howard specifically because of our geographical position right now, how y'all can speak to what appears to be a pattern of like, I don't know, just this like pushing out, and it seems to be like a long-standing pattern and what is like a really ongoing conversation, but I would love to know more about that. Like if we're pointing to people who are really like in the work, capital W work, who are not even supported by their institutions and are having to go. And mind you, even on my walk here, like on my way here, I learned that the students are protesting against Mayor Bowser as the choice for the commencement speaker, right? I mean, so it's that, and then the last kind of thing that I'll mention too with regard to Howard, of course, we have to note the beginning with the school being named after Oliver Otis Howard. And then I actually just read this on campus a couple of days ago that the first students to enroll, and therefore the first graduates, were a group of 4 white women. So taking all of that context into consideration, I just would love to know y'all's opinions about the tension, and I just want to shout out your narrative in terms of, yeah, like walking the talk of, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let me say this, my sister. I just want to make one thing clear, by the way. You know, a critical analysis of Howard does not dismiss the critical aspect of Howard University. Okay? To me, let's not confuse. I will tell you, out of UCLA, 6 black filmmakers come out. I came to a black school intentionally. I was confronting, I struggled, I battled, and this is even the synthesis, this place here, of that struggle. But I wouldn't have spent this energy in a white school. Howard is where you meet the special children of African Americans from diverse geographical location. To me, if you ask me Howard paying me what I'm worth, forget it. I knew it day one when I came. How they saw how they evaluate, I didn't care. That's not my motivation of Howard. Howard is where I met some of the best kids on the planet who cross over state lines. And this is serious. Who cross state lines to come to Howard.
That's right.
And they are my favorite part of Howard experience.
That's right.
Not the presidents, not the deans, not the faculty even. Because some faculty don't deserve Howard University position. They're mercenaries, salary mercenaries who allow the exploitation of the special, precious black kids, their academic credibility and standard being shortchanged. Sometimes grades being given like it's a UNICEF milk, okay? So for me, I would say this. I would not. I told my friend from San Francisco State, I told him, you get up in the morning, you go to class, you see sea full of white, blonde hair, black, white people. A sea of them. I get up, I go, I see black kids that are hungry looking at me to make sense. And I tell them, no salary ever makes a difference. The guy, if he hears it, he knows who he is. He's a friend of mine, but I said to him, the salary will not pay those kids in, what they gave me. They were my students, they were my teachers. I was their teacher, I was their student. So to me, let's not misunderstand about something. Howard University, the name, I went to North Carolina. I'm doing a film about Maroons, an African mixed with Native American, said to me, when are you going to change that Howard University, that genocidal guy's name? It will be a change that Howard kids will bring down the line someday. I know that perfectly. But Howard is a very profound place where you meet the best. Where would I have met Carr? This guy who jazzifies history like nobody's business. Where would I have met him in no white school?
I came looking for you the first day.
Don't go. Okay, anyway, I want to pass the mic to them. But my sister, I just want to say this very clearly. Howard is a special place to me. I think at Howard, even now, who empower me to do what I'm doing, like the Maroon Film Project, it's a Howard student that's financing me. A student I had in my class is financing me. He knew where I was. He knew I didn't have he is making sure. A lot of my students come here and give whatever they can, whatever they have, because we met at Howard. So this place itself is not on the mighty of Sharik and me. No, I have cadre of kids I met at the school that are very genuine. So I just don't want it to be a Howard bashing session here. I'm not part of that, but I'm a critical reader of anything because we do bad. Howard could do so much. I could have filmed so many old black people all the way to Florida. Okay? Film them, just tell me anything. with my students, and they prevented me from doing that. So I have my own vindictive kind of situation, but at the same time, I don't lose my, you know, sight about how I was very privileged to have been at Howard, 43 years. To me, it's my privilege. I would not have worked anywhere else. Even Africa, even my own country, I'm telling you. Because I also had freedom I created in my office. My students and me had our own government. The presidents didn't know. I had my own rules, and they tell me you don't attend meeting. I say I don't have to attend no meeting. You don't have 10 hours. I say no, I have 20 something hours with my students. You don't even know where I come from. So you can't give me this 10 hours pension of meeting students. No, I live with them, I work with them, etc. So to me, I couldn't have done this anywhere in a white school. I would have been fired the day one. But at Howard, I was able to do it. So I just don't want misunderstanding here, because it's a precious place for me.
So we got one more comment, and then anybody, y'all want to go ahead and make some comments.
Hi, Jeff Kennedy. I thank everyone for reminding me of the special relationship and attention of Howard University. And I thank Greg for mentioning something I've never heard before, that it was only 6 students when Du Bois came.
Put that on me. I don't know. It wasn't ranking child.
I don't know what the context was, so
The car was not born.
okay. It's seeing Miss Perry again. But let me say something that I find as a former student and someone who worked at the university for a short period. It always interesting. I find Howard so fascinating from being a theological student is the relationship, as you just said, between the students. You never know when you're going to meet this student that is so outstanding that it makes so much of the seemingly disrespectful atmosphere at the university worth it. And they are so talented that they remind you and make you want to go further in your own research and looking at things. I think about my own family, and sometimes I say, I talk to people all the time. I'm like, you honestly don't know who I'm related to. And I never bring it up. I never talk about my own family, and and just listening to the leaving the car at the flagpole. I remember that Wednesday when I heard about that, because I think they wrote it up in the city paper. I've been looking for that article for a while too, talking about the dispute he had with the car. He said, I just left the car at the flagpole, didn't worry about it. How he used to have students over at his home. And the first time I went over there, he threw me out because he said, I don't drink liquor. But that was who he was. The fact that he used to meet with students all the time, talking about, the work, the job that needs to be done as frat brothers. The fact that he honored Montague Cobb. I look at that statement from a different way, because he knows about Montague Cobb's work with Jesse Owens, when Jesse Owens was being criticized by Hitler as being a natural athlete, that it was Montague Cobb who went in and showed scientific. It was the work effort, not the natural ability, that allowed Jesse Owens to win those 4 medals in Germany. So all of those things come into place. I would like to hear from the English department a little more about Margaret Just Butcher, who I've just started researching somewhat heavily, even though I met her when I was younger, but I didn't know what to ask her, honestly. And now I'm understanding that she was the key to getting Brown versus Board. She was on D.C. School Board from 1953 to 1957, and she was Thurgood Marshall's special assistant. And I know she had a relationship with Brown, and she was Alan Locke's a goddaughter. So, and she finished Alan Locke's work. So I would like to know more about how that tension. Yeah, yeah. I'd like to know how much that tension shows up. So it's so much history that is untold, and it's so important today. And I thank God for them students who are protesting Mirabeau's are coming to speak at the graduation. I think that's some of the most disrespectful things that you've ever could have done as an administration at Howard, of having that invitation. My mic, okay. Yeah, I just couldn't believe I saw that.
Anybody wanna? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just, let's see how I want to say this. So I am not, I'm not an HBCU grad or a faculty member. I come from a Tuskegee family, so a different HBCU kind of tradition. But one of the things I often say is there's only 2 campuses of all of the places I've been, only 2 campuses where I always know that if I go step foot on those campuses, I am going to see someone I know. And one is Howard, and the other is AUC. I have never once set foot on the 2 campuses without seeing someone I know well. And it made me think about the comment that the young woman made about the Sterling Brown collection in Williamstown, because I drive up there a lot, right, far, way western Massachusetts. And it's very isolated, it's very rural, it's exceedingly white. And one of the things that you find out when that I am aware of being in the collection is that you miss a huge amount if you don't have a broader context, because you don't even necessarily know who all these extraordinary people he's corresponding with are. And there's something there about, and it's connected to the various statements that people have made about the arteries of Black life, past and present, that archival practices traditionally speaking, don't necessarily capture. That things like sitting at the feet of elders are essential for understanding. That actually being, like, so for me, and I'm also, because I've been trying to trace his relationship with Morrison, so I'm also been in Princeton, another, not quite as far out, but even sort of knowing, if you don't know about Eleanor Traylor, you don't know that she becomes the conduit for understanding their friendship, or Florence Ladd for that matter. And there's all these, so there's something there about that has been, I think, nurtured in this conversation, but also that is something about what we need to do that is not necessarily bound, that should be connected to institutions, but cannot be limited to institutions in terms of how do you not just sort of sustain these connections, but actually part of how we teach people how to tend to the tradition and do the work that isn't the way that we formally educate people traditionally about how to understand the tradition, right? So that because you have to even know what to listen for, to look for, or who to listen to. Those are things that formal education doesn't actually grant you very frequently.
Yeah, I was happy that you brought up earlier the Stokely Carmichael, but then there's a Toni Morrison piece to that too, which he documents really well in Ready for the Revolution, which is here, where he is in class and he wants to talk about what's going on in the street, and she said, no, today we're talking about Faulkner. So, and guess who else is in the class? Houston Baker, in that same class, and he writes about that as well. But I wanted to say I've taught at all the various types of institutions, so I have that experience as well, or studied in them as well. And one of the things I can say for us is that we have, and comparing with the Cornells, with everybody else, we have more faculty who are knowledgeable and can teach courses in Caribbean literature than anywhere else, more in African American literature, more in African literature that need to be really brought into a certain kind of conversation as opposed to being siloed. So we have everything that it needs for the kind of development that will take to really make this university live up to its history and its experience. I mean, if we've had people like Sterling Brown here, we've had people like Charles Butch, who we just had a lecture for last month, and so many others, Eleanor Trailer, Toni Morrison. We've produced all of these people. So this is what we claim. This is a legacy, and we want to say that we want to really build that and make it stronger, and make sure that we capture all of the ways in which we can really work with our students and make them be all the elegant future leaders that they're supposed to be. The other thing is, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and for us, Harvard is not the university, it's Howard. And that comes, it's Howard before Harvard. People don't even understand the difference. And they're not ignorant or unintelligent. They just know that this is the place if you want to send students so they will get nurtured, get knowledge, and be really ready to work for community. It has to be Howard.
And in Africa, I say I teach at Howard, and their newspapers, even in Europe and in the Francophone countries, they say I teach at Harvard. Right. So it's amazing. In the Caribbean, they knew the difference. In Africa, yeah, yeah, but no, the Caribbean and even in Jamaica, it's what you said. Howard is very prominent, but in Africa, in Ethiopia, where I teach according to them at Harvard. I keep correcting Howard, but this is also I'm trying to make a statement here. They could not believe or know this part. Even initially when I was teaching, and sorry Ethiopians, don't get mad, Ethiopians didn't respect me teaching in a black school. They thought I was just a lower person. And what happened? Their children are now going to school at Howard. There's over 300 new from Ethiopia and here against their parents coming to school. That's my sweet revenge. You better show. Go ahead.
The one other thing though that because you were mentioning Ready for Revolution, that I love is Kwame Ture saying that Sterling Brown taught him to love his people. And I think it connects to what Professor Gerima was talking about in terms of Africans and civility.
So we're going to wind up. I will say just about Margaret Just Butcher, Jeff. You probably already know this. I think it's in the Negro in American Culture, which is the book, as you say, she finishes after Locke gets too sick to finish. I think it's in the introduction. She talks about the first time she met Elaine Locke. She was in Minor Hall, which is reopened, of course. It was, of course, Minor Teacher College at the time. And she was in a Christmas play, if memory serves me correctly, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And her father and Elaine Locke were standing outside the auditorium. Margaret Just Butcher's father, of course, is Ernest Everett Just, who taught in the English department before he became known to be in the biological scientist, won the Spingarn Medal, all that. So she comes out, little girl, all proud, I got my line. So she came out and said, "How did I do?" Her father says, "You missed a line." At which point, Professor Locke is like, "Oh, no, 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 you were wonderful, man." So that relationship started when she was a little girl on this campus. And of course, she married, what was Butcher's first name? Was it Raymond Butcher? He was in the drama department. He saw Joe Selman in there, which is interesting because there's that whole thing, because Eleanor Trailer is in theater, right? When she comes, she's in English as well, but Selman in theater, so there's that whole relationship between the theater department at Howard and Sterling Brown that would be very interesting to begin to uncover, because
He was the mentor.
yeah, go ahead, say something about that, Iman.
Before there's actually beautiful letters where he's writing to Mordecai Johnson talking about wanting to start the theater program. Yeah, so he's the Howard Players. He's the inception point before it has that name. Yeah.
So maybe interdisciplinarity is something we could talk about by looking backward rather than forward. It ain't like it's new, right? And yeah, it is my lifelong ambition since I've been a professor to spend at least a semester, and maybe I just go down there good to Tuskegee, because my mother ran track down there when she was in the 7th grade. She made it to the 7th grade. And so I would love to, in fact, I'm rocking Tuskegee now. It's red, black, and green, but it's Tuskegee. I stay on Tuskegee. You're Alabama, sister, right here. So we should just do that. And of course, Tuskegee is interesting, isn't it? Because it's not, you would think it's one thing, but you get there and realize Mother Tuskegee, the pride of the swift-growing South, got a lot of Howard in it. You remember Brian Jones's book on the Tuskegee student, you know? Gwen Patton might, have something to say about that, who set up the archives at Council Trenum in Montgomery. A lot of folks, Tuskegee has a very complicated, in fact, it ain't Howard, it's all HBCUs. Larry, you want to, go ahead. Exactly.
There's one, excuse me, there's one question my wife sent to this guy,
Yes.
and I think he forgot it.
No, that was what I was going to say, but you going to say it.
No, I'm not going to say
Yes,
it because
you
I
are.
don't know it. I don't know it. Come here. Because we're gonna go into the book signing.
It's
Come
about
on,
the School of Business.
come on.
No, tell him. Oh, I know.
He said it in the film also.
Yeah. So wait, where was Sterling Brown born exactly? On that
Across the street where the business building is put up.
So when you walk in front and you see that sign that say birthplace of Sterling Brown, that's why it's there?
Yeah.
Wait, is there a sign there?
No.
So you're white. Go and tell him.
No, Sharik is, she's always been very angry about the fact they named some white guy or somebody who gave something to them, and they didn't name it after Sterling's father who gave them that whole land where the business school is platformed. I don't even think four presidents sequentially knew anything about that. They only know the white gift.
Change the name of his department.
It's like one guy, it's like one professor got millions of dollars scholarship, and Beyonce gave $25,000. They announced hers, not the guy who got millions.
That's it.
Cham's name. That's what I'm talking about. So Professor Cham is no longer with us, but he was the one who got them so much money. They I don't know. Anyway, the book signing, where do you want to do it, my brother? I think here. So you can get the book in the cubicle. Come here to get it signed. And my sisters, thank you so much for joining us without giving us a hard time.
No. Sit here because, listen, I won't say only at Sankofa, but this is the power of a black institution. Professor Lawrence Jackson, one of our most brilliant scholars, who's supposed to be here in conversation with you, Professor Zamani Perry, Professor Carol Boyce Davies, came in, and now...
That's how it should be.
No question.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
It's very African. It's very African. It's around the fire. Around the fire. Thank you, my brother.
I think you might sign a few copies of what she has back there, too, so if y'all want to pick that up. She's already signed it.
I know.
Typically, I would have been teaching today because I teach fifth grade. World history. I was actually just reading an essay of yours.